Look at that. Am I exactly on time? 11 a.m. Hello, everybody. Jax West from Stephen Avery Project, Justice with Jax, and MAM Gossip. I am live to go over the latest episode of a trash mockumentary that they call Convicting a Murderer, that you can only see by subscribing to a website. So you have to pay $15 a month in order to watch this. I guess some of it's been available on YouTube for people to watch for free. Um, so I'm paying the $15 a month. So 2 months they're dragging this out for. So you don't have to. I'm really advising people there's nothing in this that we didn't already know, and they want to accuse making a murderer of leaving things out, yet they also are leaving things out. Why? Because you can't tell everything there is about this case in a 10 episode series. Um, this week is episode number 7 of 10. They call it the Vial of Blood. But most of the episode is about Brendan. So I'm like, okay, did they release the wrong one? I really thought this one was supposed to really dig into the blood vial, and they only touch on it a little bit at the very end of the episode. Um, so I take notes while I watch, and usually when I've done these live videos, I've then gone live right when I've finished it. But I watched this one yesterday, so just going off of my notes, um, and not having it fresh in my mind, the anger that bubbles up in watching this. But I do have, as I watch it, certain things that piss me off. I make sure I write it in here. I also just posted yesterday my summary of the first episode, because on the last live that I did here, people were commenting that not everybody has the time to watch a video, especially with how long my videos can end up being, depending on how much I get distracted and rant and rave. And so people would like something that is just that they can read. So I did summarize the first episode from my notes and posted that yesterday. And I'll do that with all the other episodes um, as I have time. But I'm working a hell of a lot lately. And because I have to work late tonight, I go in early, or I get to go in later today. I don't have to start work till 1:30. So I'm like, all right, I can fit in coming live today at 11 and then go to work. So this episode, like I said, is titled The Vial of Blood. And it starts with March 2006 and more video of Brendan's interrogation. And so they don't show you his interrogation completely. So again, they're leaving stuff out too. But even in the stuff that they show, you can see how Brendan is being led to say the things that he says. So I don't see how they're helping their case or their side of the case by even the snippets they show. So in this part of it, they were asking Brendan, what did Stephen tell him to do? And then Brendan's response was that he wanted to keep on doing it. And because Brendan doesn't know what to say or whatever, so he's just that he wants to keep doing it. So they're asking, what did Steven say when Brendan went there and knocked on the trailer door, allegedly? Um, and so Steven says that he wants to keep on doing it. And then the interrogators, I don't know what you call these guys. Um, what does that mean? They want Brendan to elaborate. And so then Brendan said raping her. And then they're like, well, how exactly does Steven say it? You won't get in trouble for using those words. Say it how Steven would say it. And so Brendan said he wanted to fuck her so hard. So that's what Brendan is saying that Steven said to him in the middle of raping Teresa Halbach. Which, well, let me first get into Candace Owens. My good buddy, Candace Owens. Oh, do I loathe this woman? She says Brendan is more meek and timid and not sure of himself. You can see how someone like him is easily manipulated. Oh, but she means that Steven manipulated him, not Fassbender and Wiegert, who are manipulating Brendan into saying these things, or Michael O'Kelly, who manipulated Brendan into saying things and drawing things. So, Brendan can be manipulated, not by law enforcement, by Steven. Whatever, lady. Factbender said Brendan was first interviewed on November 6th. So then we see snippets and stuff from the Marinette. Is that how you say that? Marinette County deputies. So the people up in Crivets. Because now remember, Steven and Brendan were in Crivets the weekend that the RAV4 was found. And so I don't know why it says BS there, but I'm sure I meant to type BD for Brendan. Hey, Kaylee. So when the first time Brendan ever talked to police, he said he never saw Teresa Halbach or her vehicle. And then Factbender in new interviews, because remember, Factbender comes out to talk. It's him and Kratz and Colborn are talking currently to this crappy show. So Factbender said Brendan was never consistent in his answers. And he said Brendan, so that's why they would have to keep questioning him, because it wasn't consistent. But it's not consistent because no means no, guys. I don't know if people ever taught you that, but Brendan gives you an answer and you don't like it, so you keep pushing till you get what you want. So you mind rape Brendan. So, and when do stories change? When there's a lie. They're consistent when it's something that really happened. So Brendan's story constantly changes from that point on, because he tells you he never saw Teresa Halbach or the vehicle, and you don't listen to him. And you keep pushing. You had to have seen it. So, and they're not letting you out of that room until you tell them what they want to hear. So in my notes, it says Brendan answers them, but they keep pushing him to say something he didn't actually see. This is why, like, waterboarding is something that is outlawed. And I've talked about this before. Jesse the Body Ventura, so he was in the military, and then he was a famous wrestler, and then he was he governor of Minnesota? But he's somebody who speaks out against waterboarding, which people would assume this Republican dude would be all for torturing people. But he's like, waterboarding sucks. And you will say whatever you have to get out of that situation. So you're not, that doesn't mean you're telling the truth. It just means you know what they want you to say, So I'm going to say it so I can get out of this danger. And that's what they've done to Brendan. And that's why Brendan's story is inconsistent, is because he gives you what really happened. He went home from school that day and played video games, talked to Blaine's boss, went over by Stephen by a fire, then went home and was talking to his mom. That story's always consistent. But you want him to say he did something with Stephen and Teresa because you need to get Stephen and Brendan's his alibi. So now they show where Brendan's story changes, and he says Teresa drove past him and his brother when they were walking back from the bus stop, so which are the mailboxes. And which, no matter what you think of this case, of whether or not you think Stephen is guilty or innocent, you would know that Brendan never saw Teresa Halbach. You'll know that same brother, hey Kim, that same brother that was walking home with Brendan that they're talking about from the bus stop is the same one who has said he saw his brother Bobby driving the RAV4, that it drove past them when they were on the school bus. So Blaine saw the vehicle, didn't see Teresa, saw Bobby driving it. So now we hear Brendan asking the interrogators, do you think he did that? Now, once again, we're not hearing this whole interrogation in its entirety. So we don't know what they said to him first, for Brendan to then say to them, do you think he did that? And so then the interrogator says, do you think he did what? And then Brendan says, raped her or whatever. Hey, Anna. And so now everybody seizes on, we never said anything about her being raped. There was nothing about Teresa Halbach being raped until now Brendan brought it up. Brendan said raped. So why would Brendan say raped if there was no rape? But that's going to be Brendan in his mind, because he is such a good soul and can't think of harming or killing. You know, he lives with a family of killers. Okay? People aren't going to like how I word this, but whatever. His family are avid hunters. You know, so Brendan has been raised around his family slaughtering animals, driving around in golf carts, shooting at varmints, stringing deer up in the garage. But to Brendan, upon first being interrogated, the bad thing he could come up with that maybe Stephen would do is raping her. That's what comes to his mind, not killing her. He isn't saying anything about that she's been killed. He's just thinking rape. But they're saying because Brendan said the word rape, that means that she was raped. There is no evidence and no proof that Teresa Halbach was ever raped by anybody. All they have is Brendan saying, do you think he did that? Raped her or whatever. And from that, the narrative changes. Now it goes to February 20th, 2006. And so it's Wiegert on the stand talking about interviewing Kayla. And Kayla had said that Brendan was acting up lately, staring into space, and that he lost about 40 pounds. Liegert said it's not normal for a 16-year-old boy to be crying. Yeah, I guess rub some dirt on it. Be a man. Boys don't cry. I'm guessing that's the kind of man Wiegert is. Don't know if he has children, but is, boys don't cry. Um, every boy is different. Every person is different. Brendan, again, is a sensitive soul. And I'm going to guess Brendan's done a lot of crying in his life. And what they don't talk about in here, the thing that they leave out, is Brendan had a girlfriend. Whether or not, I don't even know if she was like really a girlfriend. Because remember, Brendan's got a low IQ. And so this girl may not have been thinking of Brendan like that's her boyfriend or whatever. But now this girl had recently broken up with him. That's what Brendan was upset about. You can think about the facts in this case. Think about when Brendan talks now. He talks about that he's never been able to go on a date and have a girlfriend and have a family. Those are big things to Brendan. So a girl breaking up with him devastated him. So that's what he's upset about. Losing weight. Okay, well, so Brendan had some size on him. Boys go through growth spurts. You don't know if he was going through a growth spurt and he leaned out and then gains weight again. You don't know. And Kayla also not the smartest person in the world. And Kayla was 14 at the time. So Kayla saying anything, she's not a trained professional in any way, shape, or form, that she could say that Brendan is feeling about. She has no clue. So on February 27th in 2006, they interviewed Brendan after talking to Kayla on February 20th. They went to his school. And then Factbender says twice, we told him twice he was not under arrest and free to leave. So he's a 16-year-old boy, and these are adults taking you in. Did they? Oh, no, it was at school, but it doesn't matter. It's still school. These are adults. There's a lot of adults with high IQs who, if police are talking to you, aren't going to just go, I don't have to talk to you and I'm leaving. That's scary. So trying to say you've done your due diligence because twice he was told he's not under arrest and he's free to leave, and Brendan chose not to leave and talk to them to try and say Brendan was doing that of his free will is a bunch of crap. So in the interview with Brendan, Factbender says to Brendan, you saw some body parts. Tell us what you saw. So again, leading Brendan into saying he saw body parts. It's not Brendan saying I saw body parts. It's Factbender saying you saw body parts. And then Brendan, again, saying ridiculous things on what he saw. I know it's in my in my notes somewhere on what he saw, but it's like toes and a nose and a forehead, I think, are the things Brendan said he saw in the fire as they kept prodding. What other parts did you see? Oh, and then they have Brendan recite that he could leave at any time. And so they said that means Brendan understood it because he said that he could leave at any time. He's not going to leave at any time. You're law enforcement not saying, okay, Brendan, and walking him to the door. He's going to stay there until the cops do that. Oh, we have a guilter in our midst, Amy Joe. Um, because I don't go off of TV shows. I go by actual evidence. So maybe you need to look into the actual evidence and not a TV show. Um, so next we see that Barb and Brendan go to Two Rivers, and because they wanted to do a video interview now. Everything else has only been audio. Now they wanted to interview Brendan on camera. Fackbender said, Barb said to them that she didn't need to go in. And Brendan said, Brendan said to them that Barb needed to go smoke a cigarette and that he didn't care if she was there or not. Now, putting aside my harsh feelings for Barb, back when I was friends with Barb and I talked to her about this very thing about not going in with Brendan, law enforcement did push Barb not to go in there. And they told her it was better for her not to go in. And so Barb listened to law enforcement. Now, I get very mad at Barb on her just leaving Brendan to the wolves. But so many of the Avery family, and this is not a knock on them, but they have low IQs. And Barb is one of those, is not the smartest person. And they told her she didn't need to go in there and that it would be better if she wasn't in the room. And she listened to them. Now, we can be Monday morning quarterbacking about how she needed to be in there defending her son. But Barb also was no match for trained law enforcement. And this is a discussion I actually had with Brendan's attorney, Laura Nyrider, back when we were writing the Juvenile Interrogation Protection law. And because when I was new to this case and was so appalled to learn that it is legal to interrogate a minor without a parent's knowledge or consent. You don't even have to know. They don't have to tell you they take your kid from school. School doesn't have to get the parents' permission of letting Brendan go and being transported to the police station. So I'm like, yeah, there needs to be a law that they're minors. You cannot talk to them without their parent or an attorney. And when we were putting together this bill, I talked to Laura Nyrider because she's, somebody that's knowledgeable in juvenile interrogations. And I'm a mom too. My son is an adult. He's going to be 30 on Tuesday, by the way. I am so old. My son is going to be 30. But anyway, if my son was interrogated and I go in that room and they start talking to them, to my son that way, I'm going to pop off. And when I was talking to Nyrider, she had said to me, no. And that's why the language in the Juvenile Interrogation Protection Law specifically says a parent, not a parent, an attorney needs to be in the room with them, not a parent, because a parent isn't the best person to advocate for their child at that moment. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. Because I don't know the law. I'm not trained. I'm just a mama bear that how the fuck dare you talk to my child like that? And that's not going to help his case. And I'm going to look like an idiot. And because I'm just going to go off all half cocked. You need somebody who knows the law. And so Barb is many things, but not going in the room with Brendan. She was manipulated by law enforcement to stay out of that room. And so Barb did give permission. It sucks, but even if she had gone in, nothing would change here. Because we even see Barb through all these years and all these questionings, how she flips and flops, that Steven's guilty, Steven's not guilty, how she can get revved up by whoever talks to her last. So, an attorney. And so, the best thing we can do as parents, everyone out here watching this, and it was a conversation I had with my son, who, when Making a Murderer came out, how old was my son? Was he 19 at that time? 20? I don't know. I don't do math. Um, and so he looked at me like I'm a whack job. But I'm saying to him, if you are ever interrogated by police for any reason, you have to ask for a lawyer. And that's what we need to raise our children to know. You know, yeah, we raise our kids respect authority. Respect the police, right? That's what everybody wants kids to do. But not all police are good, and they're just trying to close a case. So you need a lawyer in that room. But another thing that's in that juvenile interrogation protection law that was another excellent point from Laura Nyrider. That's why you need to have a lawyer who knows what they're doing. Is she says someplace like Manitowoc, that if you take somebody into custody on a Friday, you may not then be able to get to an attorney on Monday. So if it's in some place way out in the boonies and you need somebody to drive afar from the city to get there, so somebody may have to sit there in custody for days until a lawyer can get there. So I can't remember the wording on it, but it is that they can be represented in person or electronically. And this is also, when I talked to Laura, it's before Zoom was a thing and all that, but so a lawyer should be able to be on a speakerphone, on, whatever, FaceTime, I don't know. But, just so somebody's not sitting there rotting away until a lawyer can get there. But you need a lawyer's participation. And don't let them manipulate you into you look guilty if you ask for a lawyer. Some people may think that, but you have better odds if you have an attorney than if you never had an attorney and you talk, because look at what they have done in this case and many others. Let me go back to where I was. So now Brendan, in this interview, I need a drink of water, sorry. I've also been sick for a week, so all right. So now in this interview, Brendan is saying the bus dropped them off at 3:45 and he saw her Jeep. He called it a Jeep. He saw her Jeep down by our house. And here's the part of the story that rattles off really fast and always stays the same. They walked home from the bus stop, went in my house. He played PlayStation 2 for 2 hours. He ate, and then Steven called and asked if I wanted to come to a fire. I brought a golf cart. We drove around and picked up stuff and threw it in the fire. And now this is where it's in my notes where they have him say he saw her belly and forehead in the fire. This is when Candace butts in and says, the police didn't even have Brendan on their radar until then. They were just worried about him because Kayla said he was losing weight. And then this ended up being a major breakthrough in the case. Oh, Factbender and Liegert, such humanitarians. They just truly cared about Brendan's well being. That's why they went to question him. Yeah, right. Um, we hear a phone call between Stephen and Dolores where Dolores is telling Stephen that they got Brendan in the police station. And Stephen said Brendan should say, or Stephen said that Barb should say that Brendan can't talk without a lawyer. The show is also making that seem suspicious. And why would Stephen say that? Well, why would Stephen say that? Think maybe it has something to do with him serving for an assault he didn't do? And that he did 18 years around criminals hearing all these stories of what happens when people get interrogated by police? Now, mind you, Stephen never listens to his own advice. He always talked to them without a lawyer himself, getting himself in trouble. But there's nothing suspicious about him saying Barb should stop it. It's not saying because, oh, that must mean Stephen and Brendan did something together. It's because he knows what the cops are doing. Candace Owens is claiming that, or I don't know if it was Candace because it's not in my notes, so I can't remember. I can't remember if it was Candace or Factbender who is saying that they put them in Fox Hills to protect the integrity of what Brendan told them, and then for his safety for when Stephen found out he was talking. Please. Again, such swell people to hide them away. Mm-hmm. Now we get to there being reddish brown stains on the concrete in Stephen's garage that they immediately say is blood. And we see that Buting said in the trial that transmission fluid would leave a brownish stain on concrete. They show Brendan testifying that that could have been blood in the garage because, again, Brendan's an expert on stains in a garage, apparently. They play a call that they say is from February 28th. Hopefully I remember this February 28th. If I forget, somebody remind me. So on February 28th, Stephen calls his attorney. And this was the attorney that is in his wrongful conviction case. And he tells them that he tells the attorney that they've been talking to Brendan. And he said, and his attorney's like, why would they be talking to Brendan? And he's like, because Brendan was with me that night at the fire. And Candace Owen jumps to the conclusion that this call is a big deal because Stephen mentions the bonfire, but he had never said to the police before that there had been a fire. All right, I got so much to say here at this moment, and I'm hoping I'm not going to forget everything. I should write it down. All right, let's first talk about Stephen. The only thing Stephen has not been consistent on is if he had a fire or not. If you've been watching me all these years, I know I'm a broken record because I say this stuff all the time, but I need to keep repeating myself. Where they lived, they don't have garbage service like more populated areas. So they burn a lot of it, because either you have to take your stuff to the dump, which is a pain in the ass, or you burn it. That's why they have all these burning barrels. So you have a lot of fires. So for Stephen right away not to know if on this particular Monday did he have a fire or not that night. He knows he did a fire with Brendan, but he's not sure which day it was. That's where the confusion is. So it is not Stephen trying to cover up the fact that there's a fire, or he doesn't know that Monday night specifically when first talking about it if he had a fire that Monday night or was it Tuesday night. Doesn't know. That's first of all. Second of all, I need to talk about this February 28th. I believe it's in. Here's my plug. One of my plugs for my book, Wrongfully Abused, that you can get on Amazon. So I had gone to see Brendan's attorneys, Drizzen and Nyrider. I've seen them speak a couple of times, and when I was brand new to this case, I went and saw everything. Um, and so I would go and I brought paper and a pen with me and I would take notes, and then I would write articles for to summarize what happened at, like, I went and saw Buting and Strang in Milwaukee, and I saw Buting and Strang in Chicago. I saw Buting at a book signing thing. I was going to go to a Ken Kratz book thing he was going to do that I also scheduled a protest for. So and these were being posted on, there's a Facebook page called Free Brendan Dassey that still exists and I am still an admin of, but when I took over Stephen Avery Project, I kind of stopped doing anything on Free Brendan Dassey, and just focused everything on going on Stephen Avery Project. I'm not the one who started Free Brendan Dassey, somebody else did, and so, but the articles were going up there on Free Brendan Dassey. And so after I had gone to see Nyrider and Drizzen at one of the events, and I had written up a review of it and what we learned from it, there's a big thing on the dates of when Brendan is brought in for questioning. So, so he's brought in on the 26th and he's brought in on the 27th. He's not brought in on the 28th. And then he's brought in on March 1st. And then that's when we get I'm just going to come out and say this, who shot her in the head? So what is the big significance of the 28th? That is the day that they had gone in the garage and they found the magic bullet. So up until that point, when they now find a random casing, and now they want to claim that Teresa's been shot. Prior to that, the narrative never included Teresa Halbach being shot. So now they need Brendan, because Drizzen actually called me and told me about that, about the 28th, for me then to edit my article and put in there the significance of Brendan being questioned on the 26th, the 27th, not the 28th, and then March 1st is now when Brendan confesses. So they needed to pull Brendan back in because they need Brendan to say she was shot so they can tie this bullet to the crime. Because otherwise, this is just another casing that is there's casings all over the place. So they bring Brendan in, and he doesn't understand, because Brendan is the only one who doesn't go hunting in his family. And so when you're saying, what did he do to her head? First things Brendan can think of is punched her, cut her hair, cut her throat. I'm just going to come out and say it. Who shot her in the head? He did. Because anybody would do that, right? If it's you or me, it's going to be you. Now, Stephen, on the other hand, if that had happened to Stephen still would have said, no one shot her. We didn't do nothing, is what Stephen would have. Oh my God, I was going to say stuck to his guns. Oh my God, how poor taste is that? Um, but Stephen would have stood firm on that. Didn't do anything. But Brendan now, when you have law enforcement saying, which one of you, who shot her in the head, it's you or Stephen, he did. So what Drizzen had said to me is that destroys it right there because you've tampered with the witness. They needed Brendan to say from himself that Stephen shot her. Not the first time the word shot comes from anybody, it comes from Fackbender and Liegert. Because they wanted to tie this bullet to the crime. There was nothing about that bullet until they decide we find this bullet. Now we need Brendan to talk about it. So they pull Brendan back in. They find the bullet on the February 28th, and they pull Brendan back in on March 1st. I'm just going to come out and say it. Who shot her in the head? Correct. The bullet was found February 28th, Robert. So March 1st, they take Brendan. This is where we're at in the show. March 1st, they take Brendan into the sheriff's department. And they say to him, no, they know there are some things you've left out or aren't quite correct. And so they're saying things to Brendan like, because I was writing down their words as they were saying it. We pretty much know everything. What happens next? We already know. It's not your fault. He asks you, doesn't he? What does he ask you? And so then Brendan's response was, do I want a girlfriend? And so then they keep pushing him on that. To which then, all right, so because I put down the exact words that Brendan said. Do I want to or to have me get some pussy? I said I wasn't aged, so he took me back there and showed me some. And then they're like, what is some? And so then Brendan said her naked body. And then Brendan says he told me to do her. And so they're asking him, what does that mean? And Brendan said to screw her. And so Brendan said that he did. And Candace Owen butts in saying that this was conveniently left out of Making a Murderer. She felt physically sick when she first heard it. Well, I heard this too back in Making a Murderer, by the way. And I also felt physically sick that they were forcing this young boy into saying something that didn't happen. Look at Brendan Dassey. Everything you know about Brendan Dassey. Do you think that boy is capable of raping a girl while his uncle watches? Even, if his uncle is yelling at him and telling him, do it, you have to do it, like they're trying to make Stephen out to be this big monster doing that. Do you think Brendan would have been able to do that? Or do you think Brendan would have gone out screaming and crying? I mean, I know Wiegert says boys don't cry, but really? Do you think Brendan would have been able to do that? Do you think Brendan would be able to have an erection? So then they're asking Brendan things like, what does intercourse mean? And so Brendan says, intercourse means you stuck it in her. And then they're like, stuck what in her? And he's like, penis in her vagina. And then they say, where was Stephen at this time? And he says, Stephen was standing by the door. And then he said that Stephen told him I did a good job and closed the door. And then Candace Owens says, he raped her and her uncle said he did a good job. And then she says, I have no words. I wish you had no words. Fuck you, bitch. Those are the words I have for Miss Candace Owens. Stephen can be an asshole. He can be a misogynist. He can be whatever you want to say. Brendan is an innocent soul. And he is not raping anyone. I really wanted to. Well, I need to do this before the Brendan episode. I need to get out my letters from Brendan and read you my letters with Brendan, where he like talks to me about Pokemon. A story I've told about Brendan, and I believe is in my book, is when I went to his prison. I was not on his visitors list at that time. At that time, I was only talking to Brendan on the phone. And, but I went with who was a friend at the time while they were going to visit Brendan. And so when I talked to Brendan and, oh my God, see, I start to get worked up about Brendan and I'm going to cry and I don't want to cry. And so Brendan knew that I was going to be sitting out in the car for the couple of hours during the visit. And so he had asked me, you know, what am I going to do during that time? And I'm like, well, I'll be fine. You know, I have my phone, so I could be on the internet. I could bring a book and I could read. That was one of the times when I was trying to exercise and lose weight. And I'm like, I could go for a walk. And Brendan's like, oh, you need to be careful. Because if you go for a walk and if, you know, the inmates see you, they might whistle at you. That's the innocence of Brendan. You know, so he's not instantly going and saying like they're going to say vulgarities to me or anything. The thing he's telling me I need to be careful of is men whistling at me. That's the sweetness of Brendan. He's really such a sweet boy. And when the girl came out from the visit, she then handed me an open bag of chili Fritos, which I still have the wrapper. Brendan sent it out because he said he knew I'd be hungry and wanted me to have a snack after sitting there all that time. He's a considerate, sweet boy. He's not raping anyone. He's not harming anyone. He's just not. So say what you will about Stephen. Brendan is literally the lamb brought to the slaughter. On March 1st, is when Brendan Dassey was now charged. And then I have in my notes, because I'm also at this time when I'm watching it too, that I'm getting agitated because they want to keep pointing out, Making a Murderer didn't show you this, but blah, blah, blah. So in my notes is, they didn't show Brendan thinking he was going back to class. Brendan has no clue all this stuff that he just said. You've now said that you were part of a rape and a murder and a destruction of a body. He has no clue. He's saying what they told him to say. And he thinks he's going back to class. But they're not showing you that. Then there's the press conference to say that they arrested Brendan Dassey. One of the press, I don't even remember what his name is. I know in the first episode I had written down the guy's name that, we see in Making a Murderer, and now he's currently a part of this one. But I just refer to him as Press Douche. So when you hear that, I'm talking about this guy. So the Press Douche said Brendan was a pretty willing accomplice. They got that from the press conference, that Brendan was a pretty willing accomplice. Candace says the details are so gruesome that Ken Kratz issues a warning. Take the kids out of the room. It's not because Mr. Sweaty Sweat likes an audience and is being all dramatic. Kratz says while Teresa is pleading for her life, he hands the knife to Brendan and tells him to cut her throat. So Ken Kratz, in the footage, the new footage, he says he now knows doing that press conference was wrong. He should have just released the documents and let the press reveal the details. But he didn't want Teresa Halbach's family to hear those details. So then we hear from a guilter who is dismissing the thought of that Stephen should get a new trial due to that press conference tampering with the jury pool. And Candace Owens mocks the pretrial publicity because she says it was Stephen's lawyers that chose to keep the trial local. So it's their fault that Kratz is on the news making shit up about his own perverted fantasies to say that Stephen and Brendan did to Teresa Halbach while using his sexting finger. So it's never Manitowoc's fault. It's everybody else's fault. So it is the lawyer's fault for keeping the trial in Manitowoc that the jury was able to see their press conferences. We hear Barb in an interview saying that Brendan doesn't lie and that Stephen pushes the kids around. We see current Candy Avery saying she feels sorry for Brendan. And then we see the press douche saying that this was not against Brendan's will. He did it because his uncle told him to. And it's like, didn't you just contradict yourself? It's not against his will. He did it because his uncle told him to. So even if that was true, that's against Brendan's will. He's doing it because he was told to. He's being forced to. So now we hear Dolores on the phone with Stephen, and he said, I didn't do nothing to your son, because Barb is screaming in the background while Stephen is talking to Dolores. And Barb says Brendan doesn't lie. And Stephen said, well, Brendan is a liar. And you let him talk to the cops all the time. Ask for a lawyer. And, I'm like, what does this mean? Because my note says Barb tells glasses Stephen can rot in hell. That's the press chick with the glasses. So in her interview with that chick who is on this current thing too, trying to say that Stephen and Brendan are guilty. So Barb says Stephen can rot in hell. Barb constantly went back and forth on Stephen's guilty, Stephen's not. Stephen's guilty, Stephen's not. You see how she defends Bobby, who is the guilty one in all of this. So, of course, she's going to say Brendan doesn't lie. And, of course, Stephen's going to say he's a liar because he's saying these things happened and they didn't happen. Your son is lying. And of course, Stephen would want Brendan to shut the fuck up. Stop talking. Because all it's doing is hurting Stephen. There's no evidence other than what Brendan is saying. And then everything they planned. Um, so there's nothing suspicious about Stephen telling Barb, tell your son to shut up. Um, then there's a call when Dolores puts Laura Riccardi on the phone, if that's how you say her name, one of the documentarians with Stephen. And so this little segment is just trying to show you, claiming that by the documentarians in their talking to Stephen, that they were always trying to make a show that would say that Stephen was innocent and that they were going to doctor things to make Stephen look innocent. Because Stephen would say things to Laura and Laura would say, yes, I know, and we still support you. Well, that doesn't mean they're saying they know he's innocent. They're saying they still support Stephen. And so what Stephen was saying to Laura is, if he had done this, there would be blood all over the house. And then they once again show the interrogation of Brendan saying they cut her throat. And that he was told to go across her throat and pull it back. All right. So here's where they're trying to now pick apart this stuff. They're now trying to claim there wouldn't be any blood in the house. So, they keep my notes say they keep defending the fact there is no evidence. They say just because it didn't occur, saying it doesn't mean it didn't occur just because there's no evidence. So by saying there's, the blood's not there doesn't mean that it didn't happen. But here's why they say there wouldn't be blood there. They're having their experts say, Brendan just didn't cut her throat deep enough. So he basically just scratched her throat. And that's why there wouldn't be any blood there. That's why there's no blood anywhere. And when they were pushing Brendan, and so then Brendan says that Stephen stabbed Teresa. And then they said, how many times? And Brendan said, one time. And then they're saying, how far did the knife go in? And so then Brendan's like that much. And so then they're going off of that by Brendan, them just asking these questions and Brendan just trying to give them answers. So now their experts are saying, oh, so if only stabbed her and the knife only went in that much, there really wouldn't be that much blood. So therefore, it makes sense that there was no blood in the trailer. It's like, are you kidding me right now? It's so unbelievably ridiculous to me. Hey Christopher. So then they asked Brendan, what did they do after they did this? And he said they watched TV till 9:30 or 10, or I don't know if it's till 9:30 or 10 or from 9:30 to 10. And that Stephen said to him, I'm glad you helped. And then he was asked, when did they clean up? And Brendan said they cleaned up at like 9:50. And so in my notes I have, they can't see how much of a stretch this is. I mean, and I guess this would have to be another deep dive I need to do on going over all the times of this stuff. Because now remember, Barb comes home at one time, that she comes home and then goes back out with her boyfriend. Steven's taking calls from Jody. Barb comes home again. And it's just... So when is all this stuff going on? That now they're watching TV? I mean, it's so you're raping and stabbing and shooting and dismembering and um burning somebody, but you take time out to watch TV. And all these times too. That now remember he's saying the bus dropped him off at 3:45. And he played video games for 2 hours. So then you're saying from what? Then it's from 6 to 10? 4 hours is when Teresa Halbach is being raped and stabbed and shot and burned. And what are the times of Jody's calls to Stephen during that as well? I mean, come on. Really? And that's where I say I'm off of science and facts and evidence. Because if there was anything that would say Stephen was guilty, I would go, holy shit, I've been wrong all this time. And here it is. Stephen actually did it. There's proof that he did it. Stephen's nothing to me. I have no reason to defend him. Stephen hates me. You know? I follow where the facts and common sense, and I know you can't just go off of common sense, but the facts go with that. So they did all this in 3 hours. No. So now we see one of Brendan's drawings when they were showing it in court of Teresa Halbach on the bed. And what they want to push here to try and make Stephen look suspicious is he changed the bedroom around. So I guess apparently when they're saying the crime happened, that the bed, because it's a trailer, it's one long rectangle. So when you're in the living room, you'd be seeing the bedroom all the way down the little hall that you can literally put both hands on either side of and touch walls in that hallway. You would see that bedroom. And so they want to talk about the conflicting that Brendan was saying when he first went in there, that he could see Teresa Halbach chained on the bed. But now when you see the bed in their videos, when like Wendy Baldwin says, let's take his shoes for our other unsolved crimes. And when you see where the magic key is, and when they're sitting on a bed in a alleged crime scene to tamper with that, they might as well have big hair Sherry Colhane to spit on everything in there too while they're at it. That the bed is on the other side. So if the bed was where they have it in their video of the magic bullet, you wouldn't be able to see from the living room Teresa Halbach chained to the bed. But they're like, oh, Stephen changed where the bed was. And the wording they kept using, that fact bender kept using, is it was a different configuration. And so now we hear Wiegert saying to Brendan, you're starting to lie again, aren't you? Then we hear Dolores ask Stephen, who moved the bedroom around? Because you're not supposed to walk on that side of the trailer because it's all rotted and you could fall through. This crapumentary that is showing you everything doesn't even give you what Stephen's answer is. And they don't even give you the full context of that conversation of asking about who changed the room around, because next they go to Jody on the stand saying that the bedroom had been set up with the bed over there where you would have been able to see Teresa Halbach on the bed. So again, they're trying to make Stephen guilty because he changed where the bed was in the room. So next we hear Stephen on the phone with Jody. Now, this is back when Stephen is free and Jody was in jail. So before the crime. This is, Candace will tell you in a minute that this is bombshell. This is big evidence and news that Making a Murderer didn't show you. So Steven's on the phone with Jody saying he may need to take the rug doctor back because it is making noise. And in that conversation, you're hearing Jody say, "No, you don't," and Steven saying, "That was a bad purchase," and Jody's saying, "No, it's not." So now Candace says, "He arranges his room and he cleans the rugs and he wanted to return the carpet cleaner and he is not a tidy person." All right. And all right, something Factbender also said was there was a box for a Bissell at Stevens. So they're now trying to say that Steven got rid of the carpet shampooer that he had and then it was a different one. And that he's saying to Jody a rug doctor, but it's a Bissell. Now, this is me making an assumption. Just hold, please. So, can't be used in court. A lot of people use name brand names to call everything that. To me, a tissue is a Kleenex. So, could Steven be saying rug doctor just for carpet shampooer? Not even for sure what brand it was. And in that call he's saying with Jody is he said he had used it and it's making a noise and that he wants to return it and get his money back. This is not a good purchase. Nothing suspicious about that. Um and then their big bombshell is he says rug doctor when there's a Bissell box there. Well, he could have had a Bissell at some other point in his life and still had the box. They themselves say he's not tidy. Have you ever seen the pictures from the garage? And we'll get to the garage in a minute because that's about what they're getting into. The garage or the trailer? So who says he didn't have a Bissell box for something he hasn't had for a while? Don't know. But this is again jumping on assumptions. Factbender said Brendan told them Teresa had been shot. So now they had to go look in the garage again. See, so they're putting it out of context, out of order. Because they found the bullet on the 28th. So 2 bullet fragments are found. One was in the crack of the concrete and one under the air compressor. One was destroyed beyond being to examine. And then they're claiming it had Teresa's DNA on it. Candace Owens claims the bullet recovered matches the gun over Stephen's bed and that making a murderer doesn't tell you that. I can swear making a murderer, it is mentioned in there. But that also doesn't mean dick. I mean, and they're going to get into Raleigh. They show Raleigh here too, but that doesn't mean dick. You know, so whether or not making a murderer told me that the casing they found came from that gun doesn't mean anything because as we'll see when Raleigh testifies, he shot all over the place. But they also don't mention that the DNA of Teresa's found on that casing had a waxy substance. And then they're also not telling you that they brought stuff from Teresa's house to Stevens. Why are you bringing her dildo, her underwear, her chapstick, her toothbrush to Stevens? Candace, can you explain that to me? Why was the chapstick brought to Stevens? Why don't you mention in your mockumentary that the bullet had a waxy substance on it? Why? Because you're showing us everything, Candace. Now they're claiming that Making a Murderer edited the word flattened to try and make it the bullet seem more serious. Candace says they didn't want the audience to know the bullet could be tested to match Steven's gun. I'm just like, oh my God, the stretching they do on here. Now we see Raleigh Johnson on the stand saying he fired that gun all over the yard. He was on the deck. Because remember, that trailer, that garage, that property was all owned by Raleigh Johnson. Raleigh was a friend of Alan Avery's. He wanted a place to put his hunting trailer. So Al sold a piece of the salvage yard to Raleigh. So most of the stuff in that trailer, other than personal items, belonged to Raleigh. Jody brought a bed and a desk. All the other furniture in there was Raleigh's. That gun hanging over Stephen's bed was Raleigh's. Now, Stephen, being the felon due to Sandy Morris, is not allowed to own a gun. Yet Wisconsin gave him a hunting license. So you can understand Stephen's confusion on being able to be taken into custody for having Raleigh's gun hanging in that bedroom, a gun that Stephen didn't use, when you give him a hunting license. But anyway, all right, let's get back to this. Now we hear Alan Avery on the phone with Stephen talking about it being Raleigh's gun. And here's where they're trying to say, Candace is saying this is really suspicious. Stephen at one point said he wiped it off, Raleigh's gun off. And then Stephen says, I am on TV. Now, they cut away from that right away. And Candace is talking about how suspicious that is. So here's me again, just jumping to conclusions. This thing is hanging above Stephen's bed. I know he's not the cleanest person in the world. Saying he wiped it off could mean when he's saying that's how his prints could be on the gun. We don't know because they're not giving us that conversation, the complete context of that phone call of why Stephen is saying he wiped it off. And then they're saying Stephen changed the subject, trying to make that suspicious after he said it. No, he's saying I'm on TV. You want to guess what? Can you guess why? Because this is when Stephen was in jail, not prison. And if you've listened to any of those jail calls, you know that he had a phone right in his cell and that he was able to use the phone all the time. And then he also had a TV. So it's no different than I'm saying something and then something squirrel distracts my attention. So he's talking to his dad and then he goes, I'm on TV. Because the TV in the room with him is now showing him on the news. And they cut like that and don't let you hear the rest of what's going on there. Of what they just want to say Stephen's now trying to change the subject. But they don't continue it on why Stephen's saying I am on TV. Oh, my husband's not here. So the next thing they had said is that Stephen and somebody else from the Avery family, that they were covering up who that was. I believe who it is. I can't remember his name. It's Stephen's uncle, though, that's in law enforcement, where they are saying you can't kill someone with a 22. And Stephen's saying a 22 ain't nothing. And this is something my husband is a huge gun enthusiast. And it's one of the things he has talked about. And I have had him show me examples of what damage a 22 could or could not do. A 22 is for shooting at varmints and squirrels. It's like your starter rifle or whatever the frick. It's not going to be your go to gun for killing somebody. And so there's nothing suspicious about Steven and somebody else who knows something about guns talking about you can't kill someone with a 22. A 22 ain't nothing. And you know who else had a 22? Bobby Dassey. That then Scott Toddick was trying to sell for him. But again, I digress. Squirrel. The episode moves into big hair Sherry Culhane, talking about how she was part of Steven's first case, and now this show is trying to make it out like she's a good person because they're like, and part of his exoneration. You know, Sherry, the savior that was part of testing that DNA. I don't remember because I have forgotten more than I know on this case on how long Sherry Culhane had that Bernstein DNA before she finally tested it. She let Steven sit there and rot. Wasn't it like a year before she was finally forced into doing that test? Don't say, oh, she exonerated him. She covered and covered and covered as long as she could. And so now they want to explain away her getting her own DNA into, which they want to keep telling you is a control sample. Those words are important. Big Hair requested a deviation from the rules because she fucked up. But they keep pointing out it's only in the control sample. But she also used it all up, so it could never be tested again. The show thinks that she's got integrity because she admits she fucked up. Well, because her DNA's in there, so you have to admit it. But they're claiming, the show's claiming that, well, if they're going to cover stuff up, then they would say, they would cover up that her DNA was in there and never say that she fucked up. They would have just buried that completely. So now we have to go back to Brendan's drawings. This is the one of his drawing of the garage. But yet, from their very own clip, you hear Wiegert telling Brendan where to put the people in the drawing. But whatever, Then they mention luminol. And you hear Brendan saying there was quite a bit of blood after. But Wiegert told Brendan to say those words. Brendan would never say there's quite a bit of blood. That's not how Brendan would word something. Brendan said that they used gas, paint thinner, and bleach to get the blood off the floor. And then that's how they got bleach on his jeans. They show the jeans. They show Brendan saying he washed the jeans that night. And then Brendan is saying that's the only thing he washed that night. I don't know. And they're again trying to make this out like it's a big aha moment. And I don't see that at all. Colborne tells us that he heard they were going to say they planted the blood in the RAV4 and that Steven had no involvement. And his thought was, that is all they got? No flipping way this is going to work. Those were his thoughts. Now we get to the vial of blood. The episode's almost over and is titled Vial of Blood. And now we get to Vial of Blood. I've already been talking to you for an hour and 19 minutes. Now we finally get to the Vial of Blood. So they mention there's been a vial of Steven's blood in the courthouse for 10 years. We see Making a Murderer where they're showing the vial with a hole in it. And then we get the explanation that the hole goes in there from them putting blood into the vial. And then the people on the show are laughing at Strang and Buting that you see that on Making a Murderer, that the big bombshell, there's a hole on it, but then it's like never talked about again. And so they're laughing that it wasn't talked about anymore, but they're saying the reason it's not talked about anymore is because the hole goes in there when you put blood in there. And so then it talks about the tape on the box was broken. And so they're saying that the state wanted to test the blood, but the defense didn't because they knew it was going to blow up their case. And that's why the state fought it. They say there were 600 pages of an EDTA test. And they say the whole thing about the blood coming from that vial has been debunked because there's no EDTA in the samples. But I again want to say nothing that comes out of their laboratory, especially when it comes from big hair Sherry Culhane, who's told to put him in the garage or put her in the garage or trailer, who sat on DNA. Ooh, Christina, I'm about to get there. Thank you for that, Christina. Let me just jump to it because now I'm so distracted. I've talked about this in past things. My husband in 2017 or 16, whatever, has the same vials because he's a prepper weirdo. And so he drew his own blood because I wanted to see, because this whole thing is a big deal. And so, like Kathleen Zellner, I'm doing my own investigation. And so when he did that, and I took video and I took pictures of the time, there was a hole on top of the vial. So showing, yes, that did happen. But this is the same vial, has never been opened since then, yet his blood isn't even here anymore. It's like coagulated down here at the end. It's gone, so you just have blood that's here, but the hole is gone. Get out of here. I want to zoom in on this, not me. Zoom in on this so you can see. There's no hole on the top of this vial from 2016. Yeah, 2016 when this was done. So for there to be a hole on the top of that that's been sitting for 10 years, then something has punctured that again. Because there's no hole in this for how many years it's been. Somebody else do the math from 16 till now. There's no hole in here anymore. It's the same one. I wouldn't lie. There's no reason to lie. Because if there was a hole still on top, I would say that, yeah. So that's not where the blood came from. And the fact that they're saying there's no EDTA in the blood, if you can't trust somebody, it's the little boy who cried wolf. If you can't trust them on A, you can't trust them on B. So them saying there's no EDTA that's found in the blood that was planted in the RAV4 doesn't mean there wasn't EDTA on there. They've also hidden the RAV4 and won't give it to Kathleen Zellner. And then you have things like Big Hair using up all the evidence so it can never be tested again by anybody other than her. So, no hole in this vial. So somebody from that one that's been sitting there for 10 years has put another hole in that vial. Just saying. So that's all they talk about, the blood, because now they jump into the bone fragment. So they find a bone fragment in the burn pit. I even have in my notes here, dramatic music swells. A lot of small pieces of bone fragments were found. All right, before I get into where they jump into Ken Kratz on that, Candace, why didn't anybody take pictures of the bones that were found in the burn pit? Why are there no pictures to prove that they were found there? I know we're given the story that they were afraid of Stephen's dog, Bear, that's chained out by there. There's no reason that you have to then pick up the bone fragments right away. You would pause, have Bear removed, and you take pictures of the evidence before you touch it. That's the way any crime show you've ever watched. When you see stuff, you don't touch it. They put those little yellow cards, that stand like this that are numbered next to where evidence is. All those cards go down first, and then pictures get taken. And also, you're not allowed to do dick till the coroner has cleared the scene. And they don't even let the coroner on the scene. We'll get to that too. Because here we go. Now we see Kratz in a new thing saying, I don't give a shit where the coroner was. And he says the only thing a coroner does, I'm going to have to show this to my friend. 1 hour, 25 minutes. 1 hour, 25 minutes. I'm never going to remember this to tell my friend. He says they walk in and kick the body and say it's dead. That's as far as their medical experience is. And that is the end of this episode. Let me go down this rabbit hole now, too. I work in politics. And so I work for a state representative. I also help, and I've been doing this for years, I help candidates get elected. So a friend of mine is running to be my county coroner. I can also talk about another county coroner. He has no medical experience whatsoever. People don't realize that a county coroner is not a medical official. You do not have to be knowledgeable on medicine to be a coroner. A coroner is a legal job. That's what that is. So my friend Jeff, who is running for county coroner, not my husband Jeff, another friend, another Jeff, he's a lawyer. He's actually been my lawyer on some things. He's run for judge in my county and did not win. And so this election cycle, he's running to be county coroner. And I was cheering him on at an event I was at the other night where he was speaking as a candidate and was informing people how you do not need to be the medical person. You're the legal arm, and that a coroner outranks the sheriff, and the coroner is the only person who can arrest the sheriff. And I actually was just telling my boss today, because I just went, I should have brought the picture up here to show you guys. Because I don't post it here on Stephen Avery Project. It's on Justice with Jack, so if you want to see it. I went and visited Melissa Kaluzinski for her birthday. Her birthday was Wednesday, and we had a picture taken. And so my boss, who, a lot of politicians are lawyers. I mean, it's just the name of the game. And so my boss, knowing that I talk a lot about Melissa Kaluzinski, because Melissa is also a case here in Illinois, and my boss obviously is a state representative here in Illinois. She wanted to know about Melissa's case. So I was talking to her on the phone this morning, and she was telling me she was doing her own investigating into Melissa's case and stuff. And so then I told her about the coroner in Melissa's case, because the original coroner, when Melissa's case happened, said, because again, legal document, death certificate, had put on the death certificate murder. Well, then when a new coroner was elected, and he then looked at the evidence, he said, this is not a murder, this is undetermined. So what happened to him is the corrupt county then went after him politically and had him removed from office since then. So look what happens to a coroner. But a coroner's job is to speak for the dead, to speak for the victim, and to find the truth. That's why they are above the law, not the law like nothing can ever happen to them. They can break laws and But so if you're going to have corrupt law enforcement, there's somebody who can keep them in check. But then when you've got a whole system of corruption, look what happened to the coroner in Stephen's case. And then the coroner in Melissa's case. And I told my boss too, because my boss is about to go back into session in Springfield. They'll be in session at the end of October and the beginning of November. And I know the main bills that are going to be talked in this session here in Illinois are about inmates, or about, so Melissa had even asked me on the visit if I could look into it to see if any of these things will help with her case. And so my boss said, actually, she started looking into that, and she said, unfortunately, these bills wouldn't help Melissa because right now the way these bills are worded for people who got a life sentence, and Melissa was sentenced to 31 years. So she doesn't believe that that these bills would free her, but she thinks that Melissa has a great case for a new trial or clemency or something like that. And I'm like, well, Dr. Rudd, the coroner in Melissa's case, I can have Dr. Rudd come talk to you. I can have Dr. Rudd talk to our governor. I can, whatever. But this again is why a coroner is so important. And a coroner is not who does the autopsy. That's a medical examiner. The coroner is the legal person who then takes custody of the scene. And they did not allow the coroner, what is her name? Deb Kakanich? That we see her story in the second season of Making a Murder. We see I would love to talk to her. I feel so bad for the coroner. We see what was happened to her. And that was a coroner who was doing the job for the right reasons, to be the voice for the victims. She doesn't care. She's not trying to just prove a narrative. She's trying to show what happened, to find what happened. And so the people who really did something are the ones that get punished, and that there's justice for the families. So why else are you going to keep the coroner away from a crime scene? And why are you not going to take pictures of bones all over somebody's yard? So what they're showing is going to happen in next week is that they're claiming we never see anything about Teresa's clothes being in the fire, but I'm pretty there's a shovel being around it. I don't know. So the next episode is titled Bones, and they are releasing these episodes on Thursdays. So it is October 12th when the next one comes out. I believe my schedule for work next week is that I don't have any night events to do, so that I'm only working in the office. So that would mean I would be doing something, I don't get home from work until 5 o'clock or something, so I wouldn't be doing something until like 6 p.m. my time. But I have to look for sure at my schedule and see what's going on next week on when I can be live for sure next week to cover the bones. And then episode 9, that comes out on October 19th, Brendan Dassey's birthday, is called Manipulating Brendan. And then their final episode, number 10, they titled The Real Victim, comes out on October 26th. And then I will be able to cancel this piece of shit Daily Wire $15 a month that you have to pay for this crap. So please do not give them any money. I already have. If you have money you want to throw, buy my book. Wrongfully Abused, Making an Advocate for Stephen Avery, which is available on Amazon. This is me talking about the things the family has done to me during my involvement with this case and my thoughts on the case. I've actually got another book I want to write, but I just need to do it. But buy my book. I just spent an hour and a half and spending this money so you don't have to, but instead buy my book. All right, I gotta go because I gotta leave for work in 20 minutes. So I gotta go let my dogs out and do some stuff to get ready to go to work. Thank you everybody for joining me today and letting me rant. I always need to say that if you are a witness on this case, please contact Kathleen Zellner. You can go to her website, KathleenTZellner.com. She has a page marked specifically for Stephen's case, and that is where you could then get the email or the phone number to call and give Kathleen what you know. If you want to give money to Stephen, she also has on her website where you can donate. There's two ways, because please don't ever give money to Stephen's family or any people who claim to be his supporters. Please don't. There's been too much of taking supporters' money. Send it directly to Stephen. So on Kathleen's website, you can see how you can donate directly to his commissary account, or how you can give the money that it goes to Kathleen. There will be people that'll say, she's doing this case pro bono. Why would we give money to Kathleen Zellner? She is this rich attorney. Doing this work costs money. Doing these tests costs money. So if you want to throw some money at Kathleen Zellner, then throw some money at Kathleen Zellner. Maybe she doesn't use it on Stephen's case. Maybe she then could help somebody else, because not everybody can afford the likes of Kathleen Zellner. But only go to KathleenTZellner.com, and that's where you can find how to donate directly to his commissary or to Kathleen Zellner. On Stephen Avery Project, we have a thing that's pinned to the page because the number one thing we are always asked about Stephen is, how can I write to Stephen? If people would just look at the pinned thing, it's in there. That's how you can write to Stephen. Yes, it is not Wisconsin. The way they do the mail for Stephen is it now goes somewhere else, and Stephen is only sent it electronically. So I want to say it's like Phoenix, Maryland or something like that. It's a P.O. box and then Phoenix, Maryland. That's how you can write directly to Stephen. We also have listed how you can write directly to Brendan. You can write to them if you want. But just don't support their family, or please, don't. Give your money that way if you're so inclined to throw money at this case. Okay? So, all right, I'm off to get ready for work. Thank you everybody for joining me. I will get up probably before I go live next week. I'll probably write some more summaries of the other episodes. It'll all depend on my free time. So, all right, I'm out. As always, investigation continues.